Frank Stevens, thank you for joining me for some coffee. Got my
Michael
coffee right here.
Macchione, it's good to be here, buddy.
It's good to have you. We already had a life talks today on the phone, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think I'd like to start by saying I'm grateful to have a full podcast, my full podcast with you. I believe it was episode 4 that was blocked, and
Yeah,
I'm
sorry about that.
actually no, don't be, because I think it was really interesting that, you know, when I first went about making this podcast, I think one of the points of contention that I faced was that I'm going to have a lot of stuff that is not talked about. And if I'm going to start talking about it, then it's going to be banned. And my thought for that was watching so many doctors and so many people getting banned over time and like sounding the alarm. And everyone's like, you're conspiracy theorists, all this. And then I figured, oh, what a great way to enter the arena by having a civil discussion. I don't, none of my guests have ever been like, oh, crazy, yelling outlandish shit. That is just bullshit. But essentially, just sitting down, having a conversation, talking about things like vaccines and any hot topics or whatever, really just having civil discussions and watching that getting taken down just kind of affirmed maybe something's off here.
Well, the good part is screw YouTube, right? Like the Rumble is where all the podcasters are going now. Like all the money to be had for podcasting is in Rumble now. So pay attention to that because, um, you know, and they've done it to themselves. YouTube has got this world policy that they can decide who gets to say what, no matter what. And that's tyrannical. So screw YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was, we spoke earlier, and this was another kind of foundation that Life Talks is founded on, which is politics and religion are the most important things to talk about. I always grew up hearing the phrase, and I'm sure you have or other people have heard, don't talk about politics, religion. It comes up with like dating or at the dinner table. Whereas, I kind of adopted that belief, but that was a lie. And I think the lie that I believed was, you know, I think the truth is very few people can talk about it without resorting to I'm right, you're wrong, kind of just shouting at each other rather than to dive into difficult discussions with humility and also conviction. Say, hey, this is what I believe. What do you believe? Instead of shouting at each other. When I think my view now is just I think that's the most important thing, um, because I've recognized how much I haven't talked about it or fear of talking about it because I'm going to be misunderstood or whatever. And it's really the most important thing. And as I was saying on the call before, it's not that you enter a conversation saying, hey, what's your view on Trump and vaccines? It's not like,
Just
you
comes
come,
out. You're right.
yeah, but more of what do you believe and why do you believe it on the deepest level? And it shines light on false belief systems, and that I think goes hand in hand with pride, because we all want to think that we have all the answers, but humility, at least for me, seems to be the power, and then wielding that um, with conviction for standing for what you believe in, right, without making the other person the enemy. Because I don't think most people they're and we'll dive into it.
Well,
Democrats, Republicans, all
if you're a
that.
man of substance, you want to talk about substance, right? You don't like who wants to talk about sports and things that don't matter day in and day out. You want to talk about things that you can make a difference in. Like there, you want to talk about what I don't know how we ever get to a place that we talk about things that are unimportant. That's like a waste of your day. It's it's fine to talk about sports and to have banter with your friends, um, and to develop a camaraderie, but you got to talk about the important things. How can anybody not want that in their life?
Well, I'll ask that genuinely to you. Why?
Why is it important to talk about things that are important?
No, why don't people want to? Why is there such a
Um,
hunger, at least for me,
well,
but in general?
because they don't want to have conflict, right? And avoiding conflict is I mean, there have been nation states that have declared it a crime that um, conflict is necessary. You need to be able to express yourself. The body politic must be informed. People have to know what's going on. And if you can't talk about politics without being afraid that you're going to have someone that doesn't like you, well, then they're not really your friend. Don't you want to, like, you get to pick your friends, right? You get to decide who you associate with, who you have exchange banter with and laugh back and forth with. And if they're going to disassociate themselves from you in relation to your view on politics, well, that just means you need more discussion. Uh, you need to tell me why you don't like me just because I believe that you should be free, that you shouldn't give yourself over to just being a happy trash can bearer, right? You got to be able to um, desire more in life, and no man's an island. So we all work together to build each other up, and that's the way it should be, right?
Yeah, I've seen. I mean, I've lost friends who are on the other side. Um, you know, I think conflict is something for me that, I dive into a lot of the paradoxes in the context of different statements. For example, ignorance is bliss, right? Like that's something that I've met from different angles. And on like one level, and I'll tie it to what we're saying, but like on one level, ignorance is bliss because if you're caught up so much in the politics and all the things that are going on, you can go crazy in that battlefield. But at the same time, if you put your head in the sand and just pretend it's not there, then that's, I would say, almost equally as bad because you're just saying, okay, everything is good, everything's great. But if you understand what I'm saying? So what I've come to is ignorance is bliss in the sense that maybe in when Christ says, "Don't cast pearls to swine," I think some people don't want to know the deeper truth because, well, we were speaking about it before, comfort, right? Even in my own life, understanding that the inclination towards comfort is there, and having to essentially die to that comfort.
Right. You don't you don't expose yourself to things that aren't comfortable because you live a life of comfort. And we give ourselves over to believing that the world is heating up because we live in an air conditioned room. We spend our lives um, in a 70-degree room that's controlled by um, a, a thermostat and a air conditioner. So once we go outside, it's not like that our mothers and fathers didn't experience heat. I mean, think about it. They still had 105-degree days back in the 60s when very few people had air conditioning. I mean, you had a fan in your house. Like when I grew up, we didn't have air conditioning in our house, but we had lots of fans. But and I guess it depends where you live. Like if you live in a humid climate like Texas, that's all you really need is a fan. But they what I'm trying to say is that uh, when you don't experience things that are uncomfortable, you give yourself over to believing that that's how life should be. Life should be, if it's anything other than comfortable, um, you know, there must be a problem. You step outside and it's hot that day and you think, oh my God, climate change. Oh my God. And then, or you step outside in the wintertime and there's snow everywhere and you think, oh my God, climate change. It must be hot somewhere else. It's it. You allow yourself to believe. And let me tell you another thing. This whole deal about climate change, and I know you know that I'm a big proponent of learning when it comes to what's actually occurring with climate change and geopolitics and who's pulling the levers to make you believe in your own destruction. Like the
Very fake.
geopolitically, there are forces at foot that want to plant a seed in your brain that you are the problem, that the human species needs to be dramatically reduced in size, and that's the reason why they do that is because they don't want you to fight them when it comes time to profess that everyone needs to not have children, that basically we need to depopulate large swaths of the world, and people are starting to see that, and people are starting to fight back. And what Trump doesn't say, and what he's starting to understand, is that there's this force that a geopolitical force that wants to circumvent the power of the United States government. That and it has to do with the CFR, and it has to do with the World Economic Forum, and it has to do with a tiny little country called Switzerland, who that has positioned itself to be on both sides of every war on Earth, but remain neutral for the purpose of control. And if you really think about it, that's where the World Health Organization is located. The World Economic Forum that's in Davos is where all these elites gather to infiltrate governments. They've actually said that they have members like Justin Trudeau. He's a member of the WEF, and he's a young whatever he had Klaus Schwab has a term for it. Basically, he's working on behalf of the World Economic Forum as he is acting as the Prime Minister of Canada. And so, what do you do with that information? If you can honestly say, which you can, that the World Economic Forum is attempting to infiltrate governments to exert their control, then you can also say that is seditious activity in relation to overthrow or circumvent the United States government. And when you have other entities like the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations releases a newsletter to every congressman in the United States. They get a monthly newsletter called World Affairs. And within every World Affairs magazine, there's some connection to the global order, and how that touts the wonders of globalism and how great the world will be once we're controlled by these power elites, people who were never voted for. And they even come out and say that. They even come out and say, democracy is not the best thing for control, and so it's basically a tyrannical form of government that wants to take everything from you and control the means of production and decide what you can and can't have. But that doesn't mean nobody has it. When they tell you you'll own nothing and be happy, what they don't say is, I will also own nothing and be happy. You will own nothing. They don't say we all will own nothing and be happy. They say you will be the one that owns nothing and be happy. They're going to assume it all. It's a neo-feudalism. It's a way of getting you to become a serf, right? And it used to be teetering on the edge, thanks to what's occurring in the world right now. And you have governments that are actually standing up against this man and this pervasive thought that we must have people that control the food supply, and people that you know, that want to take everything from us for our own good. Like it's really, and some people want it. It's not hard to see that there are people in the world that want to be a slave. That, you know, that I would rather live on my knees if I could only live.
Well,
Right.
what would be the shift? Because I think one problem is people don't see it.
Right.
Another problem is people don't want to see it. I think maybe
Right.
they go hand in hand because comfort feels good. I mean, I think
Well,
essentially,
that's the shift then, right? Because the shift occurs when people are no longer comfortable. When people start to become hungry and pain comes. Hunger overthrows nations. Hunger destroys. There's nothing worse for a populace than to make them hungry. Make it so people cannot survive, and that will be to your own demise. It's just, I think what needs to happen is we're in this information war, right? Where what you're doing is honorable because we're sharing information with everybody in relation to what's occurring. People need to know first. And, we were talking earlier about how George Carlin referenced the average person's intelligence. And if you consider the average person, and then that means they're at the top of the bell curve, and everyone else on the other side of that bell curve is the less intelligent than that person. Well, that's okay. It's okay. It's okay not to be the sharpest tool. And here's the reason. The reason why it's okay to be not the sharpest tool is because that doesn't mean you can't learn. That doesn't mean you can't know. It just means you don't pick it up as fast as other people. We're in this paradigm where, revolutions don't happen overnight. And honestly, revolutions don't start with people getting shot, don't start with gunfire. Everybody has this thing in their mind where they consider, a revolution means these people are shooting each other and that we're fighting to the death. No, revolution begins in your mind. Revolution starts with a consensus of thought that says you can go this fucking far and no farther. I will not permit you to go any farther. And that's where we are almost there. I mean, if we're not there, these people with the World Economic Forum and their desire to take over farming worldwide and to get rid of fucking fertilizer, and what they're doing now is going to be talked about, in 3-4 years when people start. We were actually at a point in the world where no one was dying in relation to famine. We actually got to that point where we were feeding these people of the world. And now we've cut off these lines, right? When all the food that was coming out of Ukraine, for example, breadbasket of Europe, that's been neutralized in relation to this war. Just that alone is going to cut off 5%. I mean, I don't have the numbers, so I can't say exactly how much it is, but it's going to cut off a portion of the overall crop yield. And that means we're going to get to a point where these bloated bellies from malnutrition are going to become a thing again. And there's going to be starving people in the world in relation to a desire to take control of it. So, and that's only the tiniest bit. We're only at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and the Bank of International Settlements and the Council on Foreign Relations and their attempt to take control. And here's the thing. Richard Haass is no longer the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, right? He was president forever. Like a long time, like 20 years. Now there's another man. His name's in my brain. It's not on the tip of my tongue right now, but I would like to see Trump take on the CFR and discuss with the CFR what their actual intent is in relation to globalism. Because
I want to just take it.
Let me tell you something.
to take
Go
a
ahead.
step back to bridge it together, because when people hear CFR, WHO, like, could you bridge that to the average person who's basically, watching CNN or they're watching Fox or NBC, and this is not something that's going to be broadcast. Hey, this is the CFR. This is, the corruption behind it. It's always going to be sold as something that's beneficial for people. So
Right.
could you bridge that a little bit? Like, what does that propaganda look like? What does it look like? Like, what is the WH? How is this going to be sold to the people, and why is it bad?
Okay. So yes, I can do that. The Julian Assange released an infographic that discussed the Council on Foreign Relations. And within that infographic, he spelled out what entities funnel their information through the Council on Foreign Relations. And it's a lot. There are, it's pretty much every news agency in the United States of America, all over the world. The Bilderberg Group go through the CFR. The Council on Foreign Relations are basically a bunch of rich bankers, the same thing as the UN. And they want to assume control of the world. And why it's such a threat for the president of the United States, for Trump, is because they don't like the fact that he's involved himself in foreign relations. And so what's happened is, there, as the president of the United States, I used to say that, the president is just a manager. He's like a fucking manager at McDonald's. And you can bitch and whine and complain about the menu, but only the CEOs can change the menu. Only corporate can change the menu, and the fucking president is not corporate. Right? There's the infographic. And everything funnels through the Council on Foreign Relations. They have control of all these media apparatus of what you see on a daily basis, and they decide what you hear. It's like when you see the montage of all the news agencies talking about what a threat podcasts are to the world, and how social media news should not be considered news, and that they need to be trusted. This is what's occurring. There's a group of people that want to decide what you hear and see, and it's not always to your best interest to listen to them. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people are waking up to the fact that the news lies to us, and that they're allowed to lie to us. That with the Defense Act, the what was it?
With
The
Obama, with
but it was
propaganda thing,
the
or
2012 National Defense Authorization Act, signed by Obama, allowed news agencies to begin releasing propaganda to the public. One thing Trump could really do is he could get rid of that. Matter of fact, he can make it a crime again to propagandize. It used to be legal for the United States military and the intelligence to send propaganda out to the world, so that the commercials that you see in Europe are different than the commercials that you see in the United States. So because they're putting our best foot forward, and they're telling us, they're sending this message out that the United States is here to help, and so on and so forth. That's okay. It used to be that way. Matter of fact, it's been that way since World War II. But it used to be against the law to do the same thing to the American people. And then RT came in, and you had Russian television. And based upon that, they spun this idea that if Russian television is going to be able to release propaganda to the public, we also must be able to propagandize the populace. And the reason why that's so horrible, people need to understand, is because we're dealing with corporate entities. And we're talking worldwide corporate entities. CNN is not just a United States company. They're an international conglomerate that gets money from everywhere. And you never get to see, like, when you see something come out against China, or something pro-China, or something against any other nation state, or the reason why they support a bill or don't support a bill, you have these political pundits that come out on whatever, and if you look close on the Julian Assange graphic, you'll see that Fox News is part of the problem. That they're all interconnected, they're all interwoven in some way with the Council on Foreign Relations. So if the head of the snake is bad, if the very top, if the Council on Foreign Relations decides to be bad, decides that we want a one world government that's centered on neo-feudalism, and we want to bring these people, we must take control of the
What is
populace.
neo-feudalism?
Well, it's a way of convincing people to, well, feudalism was a way of a governing practice that allowed the lords and ladies that owned land and owned farms and so on to take control. The people with all the money basically allowed people to live on their land, and they could only live there if they did what they were told. If they worked in the field, and in other words, you got food, and you got to live in a house, and you got to keep warm during the winter, but none of that stuff was yours. You basically did what the lords and ladies told you to do, or you didn't live there. That's feudalism, and it's what happened during the French Revolution, and the reason why people got their heads cut off is because they assumed more of the vote. The people in control of the land decided that their vote, they should have 2/3 of the vote, and the other people should, the people that weren't, the serfs involved in feudalism, they only get their vote only counted for 1/3, so that the lords and ladies could control everything. And the people decided that's not going to happen anymore, that we are free. And there was the French Revolution, and it was massacre. It was because in order to cleanse that, listen, you can vote yourself into anything you want. You can, if you got a smooth talker on the other side that can convince you to sell your soul to the devil, or that can convince you to bend over when you're told to bend over, then they can collect your vote that says, will you bend over when I ask you to? And you say yes, you can vote yourself away from you can vote all your freedoms away. But getting them back is not as easy, right? It's bloody and ugly. Like, you have to claim your freedom. Nobody gives you freedom. You have to claim your freedom. And that's what we did. That's what we did in 1776. That's the reason why we're no longer controlled by a monarch, is because we claimed our freedom, and nobody can take it from us except us, right? And we're
Lincoln said that
we're at a
United
point.
States
I'm sorry.
will
Go
fall
ahead.
from within. Lincoln I think it was Lincoln who said the United States will not fall from without; it will fall from within.
Right. It
Right.
could fall from within.
Yeah, if it were
And
to.
if it falls, it will fall from within. So, I don't know. It's just, we can never go back to feudalism. And the people that are trying to bring us back there are the CFR and the Council on Foreign Relations and the fucking WEF and the World Health Organization. And,
So the neo-feudalism would be what? So that would be feudalism, and then neo-feudalism would be
well,
what?
it's
Like
a different type of
modern
feudalism,
version?
because you no longer, like, in some ways I own land and property, and in some ways I'm like a little lord and lady, right? Because the reason why I go to work every day, and the reason why I'm not involved in these fucking protests, the reason why I'm not burning Teslas, or never would, is because I have a job to do that maintains my lifestyle, that keeps me paying for my property and my land, and I build I'm within the structure of liberty that I believe in. And those people that don't have those things, they're the ones that are easily swayed. And the neo-feudalism is the dynamic. Like, the dynamic of the fact that there are now billions of people on the planet, and controlling billions of people under feudalism is going to be considerably difficult, right? And so what do you have to do? You have to depopulate the planet in order to make that happen. In order, there's no way for uprisings are different when there's billions of people, right? When you get even a million people that were hungry in the United States, there were like, I don't know how many people were arrested on January 6th, but they were just a tiny, tiny little bit of people, right? And what you have to ask yourself is, what if there were 3 million people there? What if 3 million people showed up on the steps of the Capitol to
About
profess
2,000.
their grievance? How much?
As of January 20th, 1,575 people were charged in connection with January 6th. The FBI has estimated that around 2,000 people took part in criminal acts at the event.
2,000. That's
All
that's a
but
that's a minuscule number.
14 of about 1,270 convicted Trump pardoned 14 of the 1,270
Right.
convicted.
That's a tiny number compared to what it could be, or what it will be if people wind up being hungry and angry over the fact that they can't purchase food anymore, right? And it's almost like the people that desire that to happen are in the wings, right? They're ready to pounce, and they're hoping for an overthrow of the government so that they can step in and exert their own control in a power vacuum, right? Because when you're hungry, at least for a lot of people, that they'll do anything they can if they could only live. If they'll get down on their knees, as long as they get to live. There's a lot of people like that, right? And the World Economic Forum is hoping for, in my mind, I believe, is hoping for something like that to occur. And because of that, it is seditious to allow, because what you're talking about is exerting control over the United States without the control of the United States government. You're trying to circumvent our way of governance.
Well, ultimately,
no
aren't we the government? Isn't that
we the people are the government? You and me and everyone else. We select our representatives. We haven't gone so far as to start believing that we have a government and we have the people yet. Because we should never get there. We're the ones in charge, right? And it's self-governance, and we must always stay that way. But they don't want that. There are people on the planet today that would like nothing less than to see the United States fall for the purpose of exerting globalism, and believe that, and taking us into a neo-feudalistic state where you own nothing, but you're happy, right? And let me tell you what. Who believes that? Find me the person that believes that owning nothing, not having property rights, and the ability to defend your property rights would make you happy. Find me that person, and I'll listen. You know me. It goes out to anybody. If you want to present an argument against what I'm saying, I will listen to you. I'm not the type of person that will just listen with the intent to reply. I'm not there while you're speaking. I'm actually listening to what you're saying, not formulating my response, what I'm going to say next. I'm listening to what you're saying, and I will reply after you're done speaking, with the understanding that what you said. I will take in what you have to say, see if I may see if I understand what you're saying, and then I'll go from there. I'll have an exchange with you. And we all need to get there. We all need to get to that point. We're just, right now, what you have is, you have people that listen but aren't listening. They have, while I'm speaking, they're formulating their what they're going to say next, just so they can get the gotcha moment, and it never works out for them. If you're that type of person, you need to stop being that type of person, because nothing constructive comes out of formulating your reply without active listening to someone that's speaking to you. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that can tie me into religion, because for me, it's what you're pointing to essentially is pride. Because I think part of the key to freedom is humility and saying I'm wrong. Um, and I think that part of to tie it in with the comfort is that when, because I look at people, and propaganda being pushed, it's like our enemies are not each other. And that's real difficult when you have someone who's your neighbor who believes a lie. And like we were saying before, if two people believe they're right, it's not always going to go so smooth where they're just be like, oh, no, no, I'm wrong. you know? So I think,
It happens sometimes. Sometimes you're able to convince people. Right?
Yeah, which I mean, this is why as I get older, I just look through the lens of Christianity, because there's so much wisdom that, I mean, I'm 35 and I still ask a million questions when I read one simple line. And I look at some like, and I know a line that you would appreciate too is, well, just to touch on that one though, like I said, the don't cast pearls to swine. There have been a lot of times in my life where I'm like pouring my heart out and trying to understand the wisdom of something, and recognizing that that person is not on that same end, that they've already made up their mind. And by me speaking, like, I think Jordan Peterson also made the same point, I'm actually devaluing my words. So, it doesn't
Speak to
mean
people
don't.
who will listen. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And um another, we spoke about conflict. You know, Christ says, I've now come to bring peace but a sword. And, I think essentially there's two divides. And
Sell your
I'd love.
cloak and buy a sword. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, sell your cloak and buy a sword. That's another one. And I've reflected a lot from a Christian principle, on the Second Amendment, and reconciling that. The best I've come up with that is that I think everyone should be armed. I think everyone should be a responsible gun owner. Um, and
Hey,
have the.
I got a question for you,
We'll
actually.
talk about it. We'll
Yeah,
talk about it.
go ahead.
We'll talk. But I think everyone should be a responsible gun owner, and that a weapon is something that requires responsibility and discipline, and that it is a fundamental human right, your right to defend yourself. And the core of it is not for hunting and fishing, it's against tyranny. And that conversation has evolved, because obviously with time, and not everyone's going to have a nuke, but the principle is that, and I think you've said something like this might have came from you, is that, um, you don't you don't you don't strengthen an animal by taking off its horns or something. You don't. Everyone has a fundamental right to protect themselves, and that, the form. I think, at least where I've come from, I don't. I think the government, if it became corrupted, they would, go against the people. But I think it acts as, it wouldn't be easy. And and I think when enough people understand that, there's this kind of, you don't go
It,
robbing a
it
house
won't
that you know is
happen.
armed.
It won't happen.
Yeah, and I think that that's that principle of, like, it's being a formidable force. It's not going around looking for a fight, but it's
Right.
willing to have that fight.
Right.
And
You got to have the wherewithal to understand that you have responsibility. That when I hear my neighbor scream, I need to do something. There's something going on, right? And it's not just for tyranny. It's for crime, right? That I am a 100% supporter of every victim. If you are a victim, I am on your side. We've gotten away from that. We've started to see people who commit criminal activity as the heroes. And, you know, it has a lot to do with culture and Hollywood. But George Floyd was not a hero. All right. He was a man that held a pregnant woman at gunpoint while he's conducting a home invasion. That happened. Right. And that's not what happened as he died, but he should never have been elevated to the status that he was. There should not be statues of George Floyd in the United States. And when someone is screaming for help and you're a man, you have a responsibility to help them, right? You must rise to the occasion. And it's about self-defense, but it's also about defending your neighbors and your family, right? It's about, you know, what they don't say is that these people that are advocates for gun control and want to remove the guns from the United States, they never mention things like, when you're in a community where there's upwards of 50% people carrying CCWs, there are certain crimes that drop off of the cliff. Things like carjackings don't occur. Home invasions don't occur, right? And the reason why those things don't happen is because the bad guys fear the good guys, right? There's this power influence that says that if you break into my home, there's a high chance that you're not going to go home tonight. There's a high chance that you're going to take the room temperature challenge, and there's going to be no judge in your trial because there won't be a trial, right? Do not tread on me ever. And you know, when you get to areas where there's a high, when you see things like Chicago and other gun-free zones, in New York, where you're not allowed to have a gun in your pocket, right? Yes, I can understand there's some issues with people being afraid that the guy in your downstairs apartment who is not responsible, that he becomes a threat if he's a gun owner, because bullets penetrate walls and they penetrate ceilings, and you don't want your kid to be hit by a stray bullet. But there must be an ability to defend yourself. And so preventing people from owning firearms leads you to a place where criminal activity occurs out of control, where the carjackings that take place in places like Chicago and New York are far beyond what takes place in rural communities or in communities where there's a likelihood that if you try to pull someone out of their car, that you're not going to succeed, that it'll be a very bad day for you, right? And that needs to be, when we talk about, I think it was Congressman Chip Roy, that was asked, do you really think people would fight the government? Do you really think it's a defense against tyranny? And he expressed, yes, it actually isn't a defense against tyranny. It's not just a defense against tyranny. It's a defense against oppression in every aspect, that you don't allow the biggest, meanest person on the block to control the block, right? And when you extrapolate the data set and you start talking about what's going to happen if we all disarm, if you could snap your fingers and disarm everyone in the United States, does anyone have any idea what happens then? That means that the biggest, meanest person on your block is in control of your block, right? That the guy down the street that just got released from prison, because you're still going to have people that commit crimes. You're still going to have people that rape and murder with a knife or with a bat or with whatever, because they're the biggest, meanest, they're going to be able to take control of the weakest among us. That's still going to happen. And those people are going to then get released from prison. Nobody stays in prison forever. Well, that's not true. Some people do. But there's going to be people that assume it's just what happens down in Britain is People get stabbed. They're the biggest, meanest guy takes control, right? And you do what he says. And that is not freedom, right? In order for you to be free, you must be able to defend yourself. And when you exist in a republic, we are not a democracy, right? I hope we have democratic tendencies in that we vote for things and we can decide who our representatives are, but we are a republic in that the right of the individual is paramount and nobody can take it away from you. What's yours is yours and nobody can strip it from you. And if you give yourself over to democracy and what these pundits on, especially
Mob
on the
rule,
left,
whatever the mass of people decide, then
that's
that
right.
becomes law, which is good for deciding what you want for dinner, but not for policy for a nation.
Well, so the law is centered around the rights of the individual. And it should always be that way and will always be that way. But if we give ourselves over to democracy is mob rule. Democracy is 51% tyranny. People need to understand this, that if there's a crowd of people that want to burn every Tesla, and there's a bigger crowd of them than there are a crowd of people that don't want that to happen, that means we can burn every Tesla. Every Tesla can be burned because that's democracy in action, right? I don't understand what's going on with this and how. Well, let me break it down. If you're a Democrat, I have no ill will toward you, but you should not be a Democrat. And the truth is, you're not really a Democrat. You think you're a Democrat, but you're not. And what the Democrat Party has done is gathered all these single issue voters and people that have a beef with the way things are done. And they've allowed for felons to vote, like our forefathers and our grandfather and grandmother. They were all stupid, and that felons need to be the least of us. The worst among us must be able to express themselves and vote. That's not true. We should not allow that to take place. If you commit a felony crime and you're prosecuted in a court of law for a felony crime, you should not be given the ability to vote, especially if it's a violent crime, right? These people to say that the Unabomber should be able to vote is unimaginable to any free thinking person would say that we should not allow that, but it's happening. And
side note, just real quick on that, because I challenge all beliefs. Like some of his writings were pretty crazy, spot on. Not justifying his actions, but some of the things that he was saying about like the pharmaceutical and technological advances, like was pretty crazy. Because I remember, when I shifted, like I want to, watching Trump, for example, getting like so much hate was really something that shifted my mindset that I don't want to condemn someone who everybody loves, or I want to be able to condemn someone everybody loves, and I want to be able to love somebody that everybody condemns. I'm not saying emotional love, but like being able to see full encompassing. I remember reading some of the things that guy was saying about like pharmaceutical and technology, like essentially becoming a technocratic civilization. And I think it's interesting because I think there's an element of, not always, just you shouldn't go listening to everybody who does crazy shit, but like sometimes there's sanity in the midst of craziness. I look at someone like an Alex Jones or someone who's diving deep into the weeds. I would go crazy, you start to realize, you start to think that everything is a conspiracy when there's so many conspiracies,
There's a lot of people, which means that there are a lot of conspiracies.
Yeah.
People conspire. Like the reason why that there is criminal statutes against conducting conspiracies is because conspiracies happen. And what we've done is we've as a populace, we've got all these dirty words. Conspiracy is a dirty word. And then that's been pressed upon us. Oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. Are you a conspiracy theorist?
Yeah.
And
In there.
or with the term patriarch. Oh, the patriarchy is bad, and the patriarchy is not bad. The patriarchy is necessary. And when we give ourselves over to believing that patriarchy is bad, then we're starting to lose a vital function of men. I don't know if you can find it, but or if you can play the video on my Facebook. But there's a video on my Facebook that points out how
I have to look. One of the things, maybe you can help me at some point, is I have to dive into fair use content,
okay, never mind then.
but I'll look it up now. Oh, go ahead.
Where a man says that, I have 2,200 years of history to point out the fact that allowing women to take control is not the best decision. That for 2,200 years, invading armies have taken over portions of the planet, and basically the women become chattel. They fold like lawn chairs, and that they give themselves over to whatever invading army is there at the time. And it's the men who fight and die to prevent that from happening. And that men are all the men doing dangerous jobs on the planet should not be ridiculed for the dangerous jobs that they assume. When men go out to fight and die for an idea of freedom, that they should not be chastised for doing that. That you're being a man and having a testosterone flowing through your veins is not bad. That we need strong men to do things that other weak men would not do. That is a necessary function of men. And to say otherwise it just does away with the idea that the word patriarchy is a bad word. It is not a dirty word. It is a necessary part of any functioning society.
What is patriarchy from your perspective? Because I agree. A lot of people see that as a dirty word.
Men should lead. Men should assume control. Not to the point where, to the detriment of the matriarch, that there's a dynamic that exists but we should never get to a point where people on The View are discussing whether there's any point in having a man, that are men necessary. And so let me say that, and not just speaking as a man, men are absolutely necessary. Being a man is vital, and having strong, capable men capable of doing horrific things, if necessary, is a vital part of society. And we should never try to do away with the fact that becoming a monster, as Jordan Peterson says, means that you are actually a good man. That if you are weak and you don't have the ability to have the monster in you come out, if you're just a rabbit and you're unable to express your opinion in a convincing way, if you're unable to, if we're all just these sheep and there are no sheepdogs, that we will be preyed upon, will be eaten alive by the wolves, right? And
it's a really good distinction.
You don't have to be a monster. You just have to have the ability to become a monster when it's necessary. And because it's necessary, that don't tread on me is extremely necessary. You can go this far and no farther. If you try to invade my home, if you try to rape my wife, if you try to kill my children, if you try to burn my house down, whatever the circumstances, you will be met with the monster, right? And there has to be that you have to be able to do that. There must be that dynamic, because if that does not exist, then you're nothing. You're a leaf in the wind, and you go wherever you're told to go. And we can't have that. And the desire for control from our government should go away. The desire to control the populace to the point where it will not fight back should be gotten rid of. That we should vote. Anyone that has a desire to disarm the populace should be shunned. That we should get them out of our government, remove them from our government entirely. So when I said that if you're a Democrat, you're not really a Democrat. What I mean by that is, if you're a Democrat who believes that you should have the right to keep and bear arms, well, you're not a Democrat, because the Democrat Party is trying to exert a control beyond what the Second Amendment allows. And they're trying to say that, no, and it was a 5-4 decision that we almost lost the right to keep and bear arms. People don't understand that. In a court in Washington, D.C., where a Washington cop basically wanted the right to have his firearm, because in Washington, D.C., you're not allowed to have a firearm in your residence that's put together, that's capable of being utilized if necessary. If you're going to have a firearm in your home in Washington, D.C., at the time, you had to have your gun taken apart and put in different portions of the house so that you could never access it immediately and fire it if necessary. And he wanted to be able to have a gun in his home. He's a cop, right? And off duty, he's not allowed to have a gun in his home. And if you look at the crime rate in Washington, D.C. at the time, it was astronomical, because there's no one standing up for the good guys, right? And you allow criminal activity to transpire without a pushback. And you have to have strong men willing to step up if necessary. I'm not saying that I'm not supporting criminals. I will never do that. I'm a 100% supporter of victims. But dead criminals commit no more crime. You need to understand this. And that's a necessary function. And I'm not saying that we should kill all the bad guys. I'm just saying that when someone tries to harm you, someone has a gun and someone wants to remove your property, or someone wants to threaten your life with a gun, you have to also have a gun. And you have to have the mindset that that's not going to happen. Especially if you're a man, you have to be able to fight back.
Yeah, I think in part that's because we're so disconnected, maybe in part with history. Well, definitely in part with history, because we are in a culture that we don't see that, it's not something. We live in such a beautiful country. It's
Right.
not something you see so common. And I think that's why it's so important. I respect, my grandfather went to war, and people who have seen that, like, I essentially look at our elders as like that bridge, that and it's, you can't, I don't know how you really paint the picture, but like, behind so-called civilization is brutal animal, you know, dog eat dog,
That's right.
and I think that comes out a little bit. It's like on a superficial example, it's like somebody cuts you off on the highway. You see examples of like road rage. That's animal behavior within humans, and lest we forget, that's within everybody. And you take away that piece, I mean, people, it's such a thin line. It's such a thin line that should not be tested.
Right. Well, and they do test it all the time. And
Yeah.
like, when you're
Maybe not
faced with
tested, but should
when
not
you're
be. Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
It's not necessarily, not that it should be, because I actually think it should be tested. Now I'm thinking about it. It should be tested, but guarded, because it is not. I completely agree with you. This idea that everybody's just this nice shining knight, and I think that needs to be understood, that, and especially in our age, George Carlin had another line where he's like, communism will not come to the United States, other ways that it did throughout history. It'll come with nice, shining, happy faces,
Right.
right? Because that's, people have to not be fooled by the smiling faces and the allure of, oh, it's going to be a peaceful world kind of lie.
Right. Right. Well, when you're faced with, like, your vote is valuable. Let me say that. As long as the vote is not, if the vote is not constructed in such a way that it doesn't matter, then your vote becomes valuable. And the reason why is because you should never vote for a person that wants to disempower you, right? You support, and this goes out to everybody, support the people that have, when you listen to them talk, they are trying to empower you. Like, I would have every person, if I could snap my fingers and arm them, every person that does not have a criminal intent, I would arm them and give them, and when snap my fingers again and give them the knowledge to defend themselves in the way that they should, right? You should be armed, and you should be capable of protecting yourself, your neighbor, your family, your property from the wolves. The wolves are there. The wolves are always at the door, right? And you have to be on the other side of the door, capable of getting rid of the wolves, of dissuading the wolves from going any farther. And so when you give your vote to somebody, the vote that you should cast should be on the side of the person that's attempting to empower you, not to take your power away from you. And these people that, like Hogg or whoever, who wants to disarm the entire populace. And let me tell you what, the desire to remove your AR-15 that some of these people express. Oh, we need to just drop it all down to handguns and have nobody should have a rifle. Well, that's absurd. That's absurd. And what it really says, when you hear someone say that we should take away the AR-15, what they're saying is that we should remove the most commonly owned rifle in the United States of America. The most commonly owned rifle is the AR-15. It's distributed all around the country. And the reason why, what they don't tell you is this: when all these people that are in support of removing an AR-15, is that we're going to go as far as we can to prevent people from defending themselves against the government, right? Because if you get shot, the high likelihood is, one, you're going to live, but two, the high likelihood is you're going to be shot with a handgun. Yep. And so all these people that are telling you that you need to get rid of the AR-15, even with the mass shootings that occur and all this and that, that people are terrified of, and they shouldn't be, because you're never going to witness that or be a part of that in your lifetime. It's like you have a better chance of getting hit by a piece of metal from a passing 747 than you do of being involved in some type of incident where someone is going to get killed, or you're going to, I guess that's in relation to terrorism, to be involved in a terroristic act. So the odds are that if you get shot, you're going to get shot by a handgun, but they don't want to take away the handguns, at least not yet. Right. But if they can get people to agree to give away their freedom to own a rifle, well, then where are we as a populace? That could not happen. You're not taking my rifles from me, right? And that's just the way it is. You're not getting it. And there are so many people out there who believe as I do that it won't happen. You're not gonna disarm us. And when you're considering what this man is saying, this Richard Hogg or David Hogg or whoever, I think it's David, when he's standing in front of you and saying, "Oh, I was in a school shooting where people got shot, and I was so terrified." Even David Hogg should give himself over to the idea that because that happened, you must arm yourself. You must be capable of defending yourself against the people who mean to do you harm. And if only the bad guys have guns, then things are going to get really, really bad, really, really fast. Right. And that's what's going to happen. That's what happens in Chicago. That's what happens all over in these cities that try to dissuade people from owning firearms. That, like I said, what they don't say is that in places where there's a high populace of people who are carrying concealed weapons, crimes drop off of the cliff. Carjackings don't happen. Home invasions don't happen. The number of burglaries are tremendously low as compared to places like Chicago and large cities that allow or dissuade people from owning a firearm. Because there has to be a fear of the good guy. The good guys must be feared, and by the bad guys. And dead criminals commits no crime. You should not be hesitant to kill someone or to shoot them until they stop, which in most cases means dead. Shoot them as many times as necessary to prevent them from continuing their act, if the occasion arises. And if you like, I know I've been talking to you about this for a long time, and I know for a while that you didn't own a gun, and I don't know if you do now. Do you own a firearm now?
Lost in a boat accident.
Oh, that's good. I lost a few firearms in a boating accident too.
Unfortunate.
So, but I have a lot of other firearms, right? And I don't know. It's just I don't know what's in your mind if you think that it's a good thing to disarm the good guys. And that's what we're really talking about. When you're trying to implement a law that says that no one should have a firearm, what you're trying to do is say that we can stop DUIs if we take away all the cars, right? And
Well,
it's a silly train of thought. Go ahead.
Well, I think this would be a good segue because I wanted to touch on religion and to wrap it up because I think that these things are tied together in the sense that because you use the word good, the good guys, right? And problem is, I do believe in an objective moral good. And I think part of the problem is that we have who decides who is good. And there's a biblical principle that I came across, which I thought was really cool, is that it says, I mean, you often tell me, Frank, you're a good man, Michael Bacchioni. So you say my full name. But I always say back to you, like no man is good. Because and I'm glad you said that because I think for me, at least where I'm at in my life, I see a paradox. If I look for evil in people, I'll find it. If I look for good in people, I'll find it. I think that was exemplified with Trump. You try to dig up, you'll find, oh, well, he did this at this point, and and I think there's different levels to it. But I think that deep down, there's an animal within me, there's an animal within you. And when that animal is let free, that it is not good. And I think this ties into there's the flesh and the spirit. And I think the only way you tame the flesh, which I think it is the example of acting on emotion, it is the animal. If you react all the time, you are living as an animal. If you respond, that to me is a reflection of spirit. That someone is rooted in something higher than just the animal. They're not just reacting, they use their mind. They use the gifts that they have to think past the animal. Because if we all lived as animals, we wouldn't be a civilized culture. So I think that this idea of, we were speaking about that Carlin quote that you brought up on the call over the phone. And I think that essentially you have two things: that either the people are too stupid, they're not good. They're selfish, they're self-absorbed, they are built into the circus, right? The circus of give them bread in a circus and they won't rebel. They won't even realize their own chains. The essentially a bunch of stupid, selfish, self-absorbed, and that's really a lot of our culture, which has been propagated probably by, you know, that thing that we brought up, that the chart, right, where it's like you have a media apparatus that breeds selfishness and animalistic tendencies, and you look at the music, and it's 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 really selfish ego.
Right.
And I think you made a good distinction between you have the sheep, the wolves, and the sheepdog. And I think that I think all three of those things are within us. I think there's the naive sheep. I think there's the wolf within us, and I think there is that sheepdog. And I look at that sheepdog as a reconciliation of both. It's recognizing the wolf within, it's recognizing the sheep within, it's making a decision to be the sheepdog, which is there's aspects of the sheepdog that has the wolf, and there's aspects of the sheepdog that is a sheep. I have a dog. I love my dog, you know, and it's like that element of being able to show your teeth like a wolf would, but not going around showing your teeth to everybody. And that's, I think that comes from, um, you know, I think it comes from religion, and we can dive into this. And I know, I'm confident I know you know what I mean when I say religion, that it's not this dogmatic bullshit that you rehearse quotes or rehearse Bible lines and that makes you righteous. What makes you righteous is your fruit. And I think your fruit is born out of how you see the world and how you operate in the world. And I think the right way to view, you know, that quote from Carlin is that most people really are stupid. Well, what you do with that is one of two things: either they're too stupid and they need to be controlled, or let's wake people up. Let's show them that they're not sheep, right? And not to just, because we spoke also a while, I think, on one of our podcasts, that, you know, one of the things that they would love is a civil war. They
Right.
would love Democrats fighting with Republicans, but what they don't want is, even Carlin said, they don't want people capable of critical thinking and operating in the right way. And, you know, that bleeds into a whole different thing. I think also operating, you know, Carl Gandhi, I really like some of his writings where he spoke about three levels of essentially consciousness: that you have the passive person and the one who preaches peace, but they're not capable of violence, so it's not really authentic peace. And then you have the aggression, those who stand up and fight. And he attributed that essentially with the Spartans, and he was actually an advocate of the Spartans. You know, they stood for a noble cause and they fought. The pinnacle, he says, is the truly peaceful warrior. Essentially, the idea, a Christian element, you know, Christ represents that. I mean, Christ, and to tie what we were saying, what I was going to say before is, you know, I've not come to bring peace, but a sword. And that sword to me is, you know, it's referred to as the sword of truth, which I think our ultimate weapon is our ability to communicate in the spoken word. Because that is one of those, if it wasn't powerful, there wouldn't be censorship. There
Right.
wouldn't be people, in the same way that you're saying blocking weapons, they wouldn't be blocking speech, because why would you need to block speech if you're in control? You wouldn't need to. Um, so to tie it all together, I mean, you know, we also spoke about optics too. There's a couple times we spoke about optics. I don't know if you remember, like
Well,
that.
the one thing about religion,
Yeah,
from my standpoint, and you know, I was raised by a very religious mother, and she read the Bible to us every night. And well, she forced us to read the Bible. My brother and I slept in bunk beds, and it just got to the point where if we didn't read it, that she would sit there and read a chapter and verse to us. And it got to the now. If I hear a book being read to me, I automatically fall asleep. Right? I can't listen to book and someone orate a book, because if I want to fall asleep, I'll just turn on a book being read to me, right? Because that's my and that's from my mom. And but what we live in a secular society for a reason, that religion should be accepted, and you have the freedom to express your religion. But what we have now is this dynamic where people have become atheists and they don't believe that there was a creator. And you can't give yourself over to chance. There is no chance involved in our existence. And any thinking man says this: we are supremely engineered life forms. Like, when you decide to move your finger, you are sending a thought, which is a vector in a linear space, down your nerve endings to your finger, to your skeletal muscle. And instantaneously, you're moving your finger, right? And the sodium goes in, the potassium comes out. There's the dynamic that allows your skeletal muscle to move your finger at will, at your thought. That is supreme engineering. And to say that, like, to have an argument about whether we were created or whether we just rose up out of the ooze, or that we popped into existence, whatever, that gets extremely limited when you start considering the fact of engineering. When you find a rock, we can debate forever about whether the rock was created, or whether it just came out of a big bang, and that's why the rock is here. But that, if you find a microwave, that's a totally different argument. And a microwave is an engineered, not even a supremely engineered, it's just an obviously engineered article that you can determine that was made by someone. Someone put that together. Someone generated that in entirety. And so the most important thing to discuss with people when we talk about religion is convincing the atheists that we were created. And it's easy to do, because it's one thing to say that we rose up out of the ooze, and to believe in this hierarchy of animals, and how one type of animal progressed into another type, and then another type, and so on. But those people need to understand that even the mathematical impossibility of that is just a tiny portion of the argument. Because to say that this species of animal was a product of the ooze is not the end of the argument. You must also say that in the same time, in the same space, there were two animals that rose up out of the ooze, or became or advanced in their life form, of the same species, capable of then creating another animal of the same species. And the odds against that are not just astronomical; they are negative. That could not occur. That, in other words, if you as a man rose up out of the ooze, or are a product of evolution, that means that the female of the same species must also rise up out of the same time, and be in the same area, in the same time and space, and capable of procreating into another life form of the same type. That is an impossibility. We were created. You can do with that. You can take that knowledge however you want, do with whatever you want with it, believe in any religion you want. But atheism is not an argument. That we were created. And when you get to that point, then you can start understanding that deciding who's most right and who's most wrong when it comes down to, and I think a lot of people look at religion as a detriment to a belief in God. And it kind of is in some ways, because You don't have to wear a funny hat, and you don't have to wear underwear, certain type of underwear, and you don't have to do these things established by religion in order to be um, a good man. Or it's not a particular religion that makes you who you are. Like there are certain segments of society, like the samurai, that they didn't have a religion per se. I believe maybe they were Buddhists, or but may have been, but there was no Christianity in that set of society, and these are honorable men who had an honorable way of life, right? To the point of, they 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 stood behind an emperor, but and were willing to give their life at any point for the emperor. But what I'm trying to say is that you can't give yourself, in deciding what religion that you decide to profess, or because you can't take away from posterity. You can't deny posterity what has occurred in history. There's all these things that have happened in our lives, and you need to decide for yourself whether Jesus existed. And there's lots of evidence that he did. And there's unbelievable amount of evidence that says that Jesus Christ was on the planet Earth. And you can deal with what you will with that knowledge. But to say that we rose up out of the ooze is a totally different argument. That did not
You're
happen.
saying evolution.
Evolution
Would you say
that
Rosetta
is not how we became who we are. Every life form on the planet was created, especially in the advanced life forms, and even when you get down to the protozoa and the non-advanced life forms. Everything that's alive was created, and you can take that knowledge and do with it what you will, but there's no arguing the fact that we were created. And I would like to have an argument with anybody who believes otherwise.
Yeah,
Because
I mean, I'll find them.
yeah, find them.
I look at it through the lens of, to me, I look at it kind of like code, and I have my work still to do, but I think applying if this, then this. I think one point, for example, contention of Christianity, for example, with Islam. I think there's two things that come to mind with my knowledge. One is the element of forgiveness and a redeemer, and the other is, for example, with marriage, one believes in polygamy and the other one doesn't.
Right.
And I look at, like, those are 2 points of contention I see often with podcasts, and I'm still grappling with all these different ideas, but I think, at least for me, the way I look at all these different religions and some of the people that I've spoken with, um, even with, even listening to Jordan Peterson, it's like, um, that you are you are you're ultimately choosing what, I all of the religions can't be right, and in my younger years, I used to hold the same belief. We were just like, listen, I used to hold the belief that, like, religion is kind of used as propaganda, which I actually still believe. But
Zeitgeist.
I used to believe, I used to see coexist stickers and be like, yeah, that's me, coexist. But as I've gotten older, I don't think they all can be true. And when I start to, like, those 2 examples that I gave with a point of contention, I go deeper into it. And I haven't read anything that Christ said that didn't strike a chord. We spoke about DNA, to kind of make this more practical. Something that I've reflected on is that everything affects everything else. This conversation affects things in ways that we will
Right.
never know. Someone listens to this and their whole life changes. Another person listens to, like, and even on a non, call it, emotional sense, that the butterfly effect. It's like they watch this and then that changed the course of events because they didn't leave their house, and because they didn't leave their house at said time, and you've given the example, like, you drop the keys. What does that affect? If you didn't drop the
Everything.
keys, what, everything.
Everything.
And in the same way, I think of Christ dying on the cross because I think he's met, as we're all met with the same confrontation that we're met with. Do you fight or do you run? And for me, he's the ultimate example of true masculinity. He didn't run. In fact, he confronted those who were hypocrites, but he didn't fight them in the same way. He says, "My kingdom's not of this world." And I look at that as like he's operating at a higher level of consciousness, and and I look at someone even on a more, fun side like Batman. He chooses not to kill anybody, but he will bring them to justice. So he's confronting malevolence everywhere he's going, but he doesn't kill. But he's feared because he confronts it and justice will be met. And he goes above the law, in that sense. But the with Christ dying, you have all of the witnesses that saw that, and the words that he spoke impacted, right? When we have a conversation, you say something to me and I go, "Wow, I never really thought of that." For example, the dropping the keys. And I've always thought about that every single time I drop my keys now. You pop my head, Frank
Oh,
Stevens.
wow.
And
I've
it's
infected
like,
you.
shit, I just affected the whole universe with drop my keys. What would have been the different outcome? And um and I think when you hold that belief to how you operate in the world and you live as Christ did, and not see, I also look at it through a resolution lens. One resolution, you could say like, the 720p resolution. There's 720p resolution, and then there's 1080p, and then there's 4K. And which one is right? It's like, no, there's more context. And I think also something I'm learning as I get older is like simplicity comes out of the complexity. So you go into the complexity, you ask all the questions, you ask a million questions. One of the quotes, in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to become again like a child. You have children in your life, right? Where I'm sure you're why, right? And it's just like there's a hunger for understanding and navigating the world. And the more we ask why, the more we grow in that. And I think a big part of it, at least in my life, it's painful. You start asking those deep questions. Why would God allow suffering? Why would allow all this? And then if you're honest and authentic with asking those questions, like for me, that him dying on the cross and the wisdom that he shared was received by people, not everyone, not most. And those people sacrificed their own existence, because they believed what he was saying was true. And I believe that rippled out through time. And I think of any great man who is willing, no greater love than he who sacrifices his life for his friends. And I believe that to be true, right? Because it's like even police, um, military, that's an ethic that's built into it. A good soldier is willing to die for the man next to him because they're on a mission higher than themselves.
Willing to
And
fight for the man next to him, yes.
yeah, and what kind of influence does that have if someone actually dies, how that impacts other people's lives? I've read from authors who speak about their experiences in war and how that impacted them, how that must have, they're dead now, but they still live. So in the same way, I think Christ is a living call to code, and that's built into our DNA. And, that's the best that I could articulate it. And
Well,
that's
in his own way, he's telling you that nobody dies, right? Like the Christ is alive because he didn't die. And what I mean by that is he was able to teach his followers that there's something beyond your life, that you are a soul that has a body. You are not a body that has a soul. No one has a soul. You are a soul. That you have this thing that you're existing in this box, but there's something beyond this box. That there's that you are you regardless of your body, right? And so that we're in this, it's like life is like a roller coaster, right? And it goes up and down and round and round, and sometimes it's loud and it's very brightly colored, but it's just a ride. You're here for the ride. And some people are on the ride for a really long time. And this is all, I don't know what the
Bill Hicks.
comedian is
Bill Hicks.
that gave this, but I'm sorry.
Bill Hicks.
Bill Hicks. Yeah. So it's pretty much word for word what Bill Hicks said.
Yep.
That some people are on the ride for a really long time and they start to think it's real. They're on the ride for so long that they start to think, oh, I need to change things about this ride. And but the truth of the matter is nobody is going to make it out alive. And you should live your life that way. That with the understanding that the only thing that matters is posterity. And the good thing is that for the people that believe that with that in the elimination of things like the Democratic Party, and when I say that you're not a Democrat, I'm not just bashing on Democrats. You're not really a Republican either, right? We don't give yourself over to partisanship. Like if anybody gets on my Facebook feed, they'll see that I rail against the Democrat Party because I'm railing against control. Like, God, I wish I could remember the quote. I have made it my life to stand against the tyranny of men, of the mind over the minds of men. Type in tyranny over the minds of men, and you'll be able to locate it.
All right.
Right.
Thomas Jefferson.
That sounds right. What's the quote?
I've sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man.
Right. So, everybody should be in that point where you shouldn't desire to control life itself. If I could say anything to the World Economic Forum is that you're wrong. Your desire to control everything. I mean, and what we're dealing with are really old people in the final years of their life that have decided they have to find a way to control men. That to give their life purpose would be to control what you do not control. You should never desire to control life. Life is going to continue without you. They don't want to get off the ride, and so their intent is to try to find a way to prevent death. And you should not vote for people that want to exert control over you. Give your vote to the person that's attempting to empower you. And the good thing is when you have a group of people that want certain things, whatever their desire is, to fly the freak flag, and they want things a certain way, they're attempting to exert control over you to make you see things the way that they see it. And it's okay not to do that. You have to tell yourself that, no, I do not want things that way. I am a portion of the 98% that do not want to see things that way. And because therefore I have a duty to prevent those things from happening. And the good thing is it'll happen by itself, because when you have people that don't believe in procreation, that want to dramatically reduce the population, or you have a group of people that don't experience those things. So all of the homosexual portions of society, or the LGBTQ, those people we're going to breed them out, right? That what you believe in by having children and being dedicated to posterity, not wanting to pass them something that was less than what you had in your life. When you do that, all you have to do is just continue doing that, and the problem resolves itself, because these people are going to die. Eventually, the portion of people involved in that activity are going to fade away, And therefore, the people that are out for themselves, the people that fuck the world, I'm going to live my life the way I want it, and nobody can tell me what to do, and society doesn't matter. We have built something. Our fathers, we stand on the shoulders of
Guns.
people who have sacrificed and have done what nobody's trying to crawl under a barbed wire to get to a nation state that doesn't believe in freedom, right? People don't make makeshift rafts to go to Cuba. It's the other way around, right? These people are trying to come here because the liberty is important to life. Freedom is important to life. The ability to defend yourself and to own property is important to life. And we can never, and other things like DEI and the belief that there's that equality and equity are the same word, that they are totally different words, right? We should every man should desire to have the exact same starting point as every other man. We all have the same starting point, and we all progress in different ways. You know me, I lost my leg, so I'm not as capable as other men of doing things, and I should never desire to be, right? There are people that can run faster than me, people that can outthink me, and those people are going to naturally progress. And I should not want what they have. You have the ability to be happy if you desire it. Like, you have to decide to be happy with where you are in life.
Yeah, Christ with the guy who actually couldn't walk. He says, can you help me get to the water? So he goes, just get up and walk.
He empowered him.
Correct.
That's right.
Stop complaining. Get up and can you just do it? And he did it, and that's that element of faith that's interesting. People think of faith as, which I did when I was younger, this idea of just like, okay, believe in Jesus, read your Bible. And it's like faith is every day. Believe in things that are not seen. Our founding fathers, they didn't have it in front of us what would happen. They chose to believe.
Right.
In something that did not exist. And
right.
Said thing now exists.
Right. The United States is a wonderful place. We are still the best nation in the world. And you give yourself over to listening to what was it? The news, or what was the program that was out there where he started talking about how all these other nations are free, that Canada's free and Germany's free, and
the show.
It wasn't called The Show. It was called The Newsroom.
No, it was. Yeah, it was a show. Yeah,
it's called The Newsroom.
Yeah, and he's on stage with the other people and goes.
Well, yeah, and they ask him, why is the United States the best country in the world? And then someone said freedom and freedom, and then he started rolling off all these countries that are not free. They exist under monarchy, and it's becoming very evident nowadays that you can, with all the tyranny that's taking place, like Canada removing firearms from their populace, and Britain sending their people to prison if they post something about on Facebook that they don't like. People will knock on your door and take you to jail because you do not have the right to speak freely in England, in Britain, right? You do not have the right to own a firearm in Canada anymore. And it's a slow mission creep toward total control. And that is not the answer. These people want total control of you and your monies. And it's like we can decide. Anybody that has the idea that taxing and spending is the answer to government control should be voted out, because, and especially with the Democratic Party, they're one trick pony: tax and spend. Give me the ability to control the finance, and I will spend it in the most equitable way. I will decide who gets it and who succeeds and who does not. And we can't have that. It's like Abraham Lincoln said, the hand that grows the corn is the hand that should eat the corn, right? You are a product of you. What is yours, right? And it's totally different mindset. Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican president for a reason. That there was the Whig Party who believed, was dismantled at the time the Republican Party came into effect in 1860s, or maybe it was 1859. But they couldn't decide on whether slavery should be allowed, and the Republican Party was for on abolition, and that every man should be free, and they really expressed women's rights, and it's diametrically opposed to the belief of the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party believes, give us your monies and we'll decide what to do with it. And there's only been more and more and more and more and never-ending more taxation since that point, especially with the 16th Amendment and the ability of people need to understand that our government, because of the 16th Amendment, has the ability to tax us at 100%, right? And so the Republican Party gave us the 14th and 15th Amendment that freed the slaves and gave them citizenship. And then the Democratic Party gave us the 16th Amendment, which allows the government to then tax the populace at any point, any degree that they desire, right? And not just like that, they turned us all back into slaves, just at the point, have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. So they can tax us as much as they desire. People need to understand this. And this right here, this amendment, in my mind, should be, we should find a way to get rid of that amendment and set a limit on the amount of taxation that is permissible. Because yes, we need roads and we need schools, and there's things that our taxes pay for, but not to any degree that they deem necessary. There must be a limit. I am not a 30% slave. I'm not a 50% slave, and I damn sure will never be 70 to 100% slave. Right? I'm not going to give my labor and time and effort to someone else to decide what happens with the fruit of my labor, right? I'm not going to permit you to tax me at whatever level you desire and send me rations based upon my taxation. That's never going to occur. And they know this, and that's why they want. If you think that we are taxed, unbelievably taxed, the populace, and now it's been shown that they're spending this money in ways that they should have never done. If you believe that we're overtaxed, what you have to simultaneously understand is that we are armed to the teeth, and we are being taxed out our ass. And imagine what would happen if we weren't armed. If there was no possibility of an uprising, or if any uprising ever occurred, they have the immediate ability to dismantle it. You can't get to that point. That's the tyranny that Chip Roy was talking about. We have the ability to defend against unlimited taxation. You can't take what is mine and assume it for your control. That can never occur. It's the 16th Amendment that Chip Roy was talking about without saying it.
Well, I just wanted to wrap this up here.
Yeah, it's been a
Um,
while.
no,
I enjoyed talking to you, Michael Becchioni. I always do.
Likewise. And I agree with the 16th Amendment. I think I'd like to maybe in the future do more diving into the Declaration of Independence. And, I think you have extensive knowledge and I'd love to learn more about it.
Absolutely.
I wanted to end on a positive note here. This is one quote in the Bible that's really been on my mind. And that's this one: encourage, to give courage, right? As you say, there's
Power.
people who empower, right? And I think a lot of what I notice as I get older is a lot of keeping up with the Joneses. It's a lot of, a lot of ego. And I want to really encourage people ultimately to take action. And maybe if you could just share a couple words of encouragement with all this going on, because I know, at least for me, I hear about the CFR, I hear about the WHO, I hear all about this. Doesn't necessarily encourage me. The encouragement comes to understanding, but I think that, I always want to think about, like, what are things that I can do? What is in
Right.
my sphere of control? Serenity prayer is something I often think about. Give me the strength to change the things I can, accept the things I cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think to me, it's an immaculate statement. It is an absolutely perfect statement, because there are a
Right.
lot of things that are not in our control, and worrying over them doesn't do shit.
Right.
But also there's a lot more in our control that we think, and the wisdom to
Well,
know when to act, when not to.
that's a key point. That's really, that one statement right there played a crucial role in my life. Like, all I ever wanted to be was a copper, right? And when I lost my job as a copper because I lost my leg, I tried to come back, and I ran and ran, and I looked like a goof running, and not necessarily because my one leg was lost. It was because my other leg, I had severe damage to both legs, and I considered it at one point cutting off my other leg, because there's coppers that are double amputees, and that way I could be as tall as I wanted to be, right? So, and I gave it a lot of thought, but it's good that the way it transpired, because if it was right at the beginning that I was given the option to cut both legs off, I may have taken that option. But there are things that, and then I have my buddy Cody take me out to run the track and try to make the time so I could come back to work, and it just couldn't do it. And it was, and it's not for lack of trying. I did it every day. I went out to run. I was a runner before this occurred, right? And he would say, "Come on, Frank, pussy, get out here and get this done." And it just got to a point where I couldn't do it. I told him, "Listen, I've been here every fucking day. I've been doing this for the last month. This is not happening." And so you have to get to a point where you accept the things you cannot change and change the things you can. Everybody's capable of it. Like, don't fall into the trap of believing in. That's what happened in Germany is everybody likes to talk about how bad Hitler was, and he was a terrible person, terrible human being, because he professed something to the populace that was taken up by every other person that raised their hand against the world in defiance, that said that our desire for things is what's most important. That you can't give yourself over to what is it? You can't give yourself over to believing that you should have what everybody else has. That when we envy destroys us, right? And that's what's occurring right now in the United States, is that there's one party that's trying to convince people to envy the progression and the power that certain other groups have, that you should be envious of the fact that Elon Musk is a billionaire, rather than saying that he has done things that no other man has done. And when you talk about like Steve Jobs, and everybody argues, oh, he had died with all this billions of dollars in the bank, and how horrible is that? And that there's all these poor people, and well, they never say, well, he put a fucking iPhone in everybody's hand. You say, everybody in this room who's a multimillionaire, hold your hand up, and you'll maybe get one or two people. But you say, okay, now everybody in this room that has an iPhone, hold your iPhone up, and everybody holds their fucking phone up, because that's the other side of the argument. He has given something to the world that can never be taken away, just like Starlink. And the things that I don't want to. I support Elon Musk 100%. I think he's a good man. I think he puts himself on the back burner when it comes to what's important. That when it came time to provide communication to Ukraine in relation to the invasion from Russia, he did it without thought. He gave them the ability to communicate via Starlink. And when the astronauts were stuck in space, he provided the means to return these astronauts to the planet. Or when there was a flood in the eastern United States and nobody could communicate from the ground, he provided those people with the ability to do so. Right? He's done things. I think he went too far in relation to a belief in global warming and this. I don't think he gave it enough thought when he started producing electronic vehicles, because they really are not good for society. But I don't think he did that believing that it was bad. I think he honestly believed that we needed to progress toward an all-electric society, which is, we should never do that, but that's a totally different argument. But the ending with hope is to say that we are the desire for liberty is within us. It's right now. It's people don't want to be taxed to the nth degree. People don't. The reason why Trump is succeeding is he's saying, and it's really scary thing. Like I talked to you on the phone about the Executive Order 11110 and how that played a part in. People believe that played a part in the death of John F. Kennedy in 1963, and his enacting Executive Order 11110 allowed the United States Treasury to produce silver notes without the Federal Reserve, right? And if you think about what Trump is doing now, he is really considering circumventing the Federal Reserve altogether, because when you talk about an external revenue service and you talk about tariffs, all of those ideas build money for the Treasury, gives the power to the Treasury, right? And it removes this idea of endless taxation being necessary for us to progress. Because when you talk about inflating the money supply, you're talking about more and more, and even if it's at what some people believe that is necessary, 2% inflation, that's more and more and more power to the Federal Reserve. And we're at the point now where the Federal Reserve receives so much money in relation to interest, it's unimaginable, right? It's like when you overuse your credit card and you have to spend every dollar that you have just to pay the interest on your debt, then you are not free, right? You are a debt slave. And if you don't have the ability to, like, I don't mean to go on and on, I apologize, but if you don't have the ability to have discretionary spending, where when you reach a point in your life where there is no discretionary spending, all of your money is going to what you have borrowed. I borrowed this money from my house and my car and my side by side and my jet ski, and I got all this shit. But now I can't go out to eat, or I can't take that trip I was going to take, or I can't afford the gas money to drive to California and back. Then you have enslaved yourself to debt. And that's where we cannot pass our indiscretions on to our children. We are at a point now where our children will be paying more to service our debt than they will be to educating their children. The national debt, the interest on the national debt is higher than what we pay to educate our children, right? And people like to use the national defense argument that we're paying more than we pay in national defense, and that's a huge number. But the important number is education. When we spend more money to pay the Federal Reserve, that the Federal Reserve is a private entity who is in it for the money, right? And the people who realize that the money is worthless is the Federal Reserve. And what do they do when that happens? When the Federal Reserve knows that they have deflated the purchasing power of the United States dollar to the nth degree, and it really is it's to the point now where it's out of control. The
control of the nation's wealth, and I care not who makes its laws.
Well, yeah. So, and the reason why they do that is the reason why that was said is because they can inflate or deflate the money supply at will. And when that happens, the Federal Reserve expands their balance sheets. What they did now is the Federal Reserve expanded their balance sheets to permit themselves not only ability to print as much money as they want, but to also purchase real assets. Every mortgage-backed security in the United States of America has a lender of last resort as the Federal Reserve. So that there's all these mortgage-backed securities that are being held by the Federal Reserve. And you want to know why? Because that is where the value is. The real asset is the only thing that the dollar has as the purchasing power of the dollar falls, the only thing of value is the real asset, right? The dollar that you hold in your hand is a construct. It's not real money. It's a note that promises a promissory note, right? And so we have this dynamic going now. The hope that you want to hear from me is that we have the ability to overcome what's going on.
Well, not hope. I'm not interested in hope. I'm interested in encouraging what people should do, whatever it could be. Practically speaking, to tie it to this, it could be buying silver or gold, but something that, I always want to leave people empowered in the sense that, okay, you're not changing the CFR. You can empower yourself by, listening to this and doing your own research on it. But, any practical things maybe someone can do week to week, month to month, that they can start now that empowers them.
Right. So purchasing silver and gold is not a bad idea, but it must be done in a way where people understand that they're not going to make themselves wealthy. They're just not going to make themselves, they're not going to become poorer, right? Your dollars that are sitting in the bank are becoming less and less, or experiencing less and less purchasing power. So that, thank God the price of eggs came down, huh? $3. So now you'll never hear the Democrats saying, "Oh, what about the price of eggs? What about the price of eggs?" Well, that's been taken care of, right? And the price of fuel is down, which means that the price of the products that are transported from location to co-location are going to come down because it takes less money for tractor trailers to haul your shit across the United States and to deliver them to whatever store you purchased them from, right? And so that comes down, and that's going to take some time, and you never hear the other side arguing that, because it's not to their. But so there's that. I would say yes, purchase silver and gold, and I stack it. There's a reason why the COMEX went dark, right? So the U.S.
But
commerce
if someone's never bought it, where would they start? Like, let's say someone's watching, be like, yeah, I'm hearing you. Like, where would be a good place to start? What did they buy a coin? What did they?
right.
would
So I would suggest buying silver if you're going to start, because it has the biggest propensity for return. It's probably going to go up to $50 to $75, and it's at like $35 now. And don't take monetary advice from me. I'm not going to give you that, but what I do, I stack silver, right? And because silver has a world value, it is a precious metal that is not based upon whether the rise and fall of any one particular currency. And if you get it, you have to do it under the understanding that means you're responsible for protecting it and putting it in a place, a safe, or having the ability to prevent someone from robbing you or taking it from you. But once you have it in your possession, it is a hedge against what's occurring in relation to inflation, because no matter where you buy it, it's at $35 now. It used to be at $1, right? Silver dollar. And that doesn't mean that it went up in value. It means the purchasing power of the dollar went down, right? And now it takes $35 to buy 1 ounce of silver. And so you have to do it under the understanding that you're not going to make yourself wealthy by purchasing a hedge item, but you should do it anyway. And because why keep your money in the bank especially if you can keep it in silver? You can't borrow. You're not going to be borrowing against your silver. You're not going to ask for a loan from yourself, right? So you have to. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from using the usury process of obtaining a loan, but I would definitely suggest buying gold and silver. And the way that you do that is you get on eBay and you find a reputable seller that is in the tens or hundreds of thousands of sales with high user feedback, so 99% user feedback, and you purchase silver from government. So like I purchased those silver that was made in Britain, and whatever value you can get at closest to spot is the best way to go. Find out what the spot price of silver is and consider how much you think it's going to rise and fall, and then make your purchase, because it's going to be over spot when you purchase it. And some of them will be considerably over spot. But if you just buy the silver bullion, then you run much more risk in purchasing bullion that is not made by a government, that is not produced by a government, because who knows if it's really 999 fine, right? And then when you're trying to, in the future, sell your silver, and it's going to have to be established that it's 999 fine, right? So I would get it from a government source. Pick your government. It pretty much any government entity that releases 9995 silver is worthy of consideration. So do that. It's a good idea. Well said.
All right. Well, Frank, thanks for joining. We're at 2 hours now. It's easy to fly.
Go on and
grateful
on.
to have you on.
I'm just glad to be here, Michael. You can have me on anytime. I like to talk to you. We're a smooth
Likewise,
talker
brother. We're
over
here to
here.
wake
Yeah,
people up.
yeah. Hopefully we've done our part. Hopefully someone listens to this and got something from it. I'm open for debate for anyone. If I said something that you disagree and you think that you can make me change my mind, I'm willing to listen. I listen to Michael Bacchioni's podcast all the time. Just come on, talk to him, and then I'll tell him what I think, and maybe we can arrange to
Hey, we've
talk.
done it once before. I'll do it again.
Yeah, that was good, actually. That was good.
Well, thanks for joining, brother.
I was glad to be here.